Hello viewers, thank you for joining me into this lesson, still on multiplication of surd. In our previous lesson, we looked at multiplying a surd by a fraction. I do recommend you take a look at the previous lesson because today's lesson is going to be a continuation of the previous lesson. Today, we are going to look at multiplying a surd by a surd. So let's begin. So we have a question here. We have to simplify the square root of 18 times the square root of 20. Okay, so first of all, we have to express this surd in its simplest form. So the square root of 18 can be written as 9, the square root of 9 times 2, and that of the 20 can also be written as the square root of 4 times 5. Okay, now let's separate them. This will be the square root of 9 times the square root of 2 times the square root of 4 times the square root of 5. Okay, now we know that the square root of 9 is 3, so this will be 3 times the square root of 2, and the square root of 4 is 2 times the square root of 5. Okay, so we group like terms. Grouping like terms, we are going to have 3 times 2, put it together, and this will be the square root of 2 times the square root of 5. So we know that 3 times 2 is 6, and the square root of 2 times the square root of 5 will give us the square root of 10. So this now becomes the solution to this question. Alternatively, we can also do it this way. We can decide to have the square root of 18 times this 20 all together, and we know that this will give us the square root of 360, and 360 can also be expressed in its simplest form as the square root of 36 times 10. So separating them, we'll have the square root of 36 times the square root of 10. So this gives us the square root of 36 is 6, and this will be 6 root 10. 10 is not a perfect square, so we leave it that way. So you can choose any of the methods you prefer. Both of them is simple and also correct. Okay, now let's look at another one. So that one was called question 1. Let's call this one question 2. The square root of 40 times the square root of 200. Okay, so let's express this in its simplest form. The square root of 40 can be written as the square root of 4 times 10, and the square root of 200 can also be written as 100 times 2. Okay, the square root of 100 times 2. Now separating them, this will be the square root of 4 times the square root of 10 times the square root of 100 times the square root of 2. So we also know that the square root of 4 is 2, the square root times root of 10, and the square root of 100 is 10, and the square root of 2. So let's group the like terms. So this gives us 2 times 10, and the other way we have 10 times the square root of 10 times 2. So this gives us 2 times 10 is 20, and the square root of 10 times 2 will give us 20 as well. Okay, the square root of 20. Okay, 20 can also be simplified. We can reduce 20 to its simplest form. So we are going to have 20 times the square root of 4 times 5. So that can be, the square root of 20 can be expressed as the square root of 4 times 5, and this will be 20 times the square root of 4 times the square root of 5, and we have 20 times 2 times the square root of 5. Or we know that 20 times 2 will give us 40, and the square root of 5 still remains 5 because 5 is an imperfect square. So this will be the solution to this question. Let's also take one more before we bring this section to a close. We have here quality 3, the 4 times the square root of 14 times 2 root 2. Okay, now if you observe this, the given surd, it is not a perfect square, and we can also express them as a product of a perfect square and imperfect square. So what I mean is that when we have the square root of 14, the product will be 7 times 2, and 7 is not a perfect square. Okay, or we can also have 1 times 14. None of them is a perfect square, so we are going to go ahead and multiply them like that. Okay, so this remains times 2, and we have here the square root of 14 times this, times 2. Okay, so this should be times 2. So 4 times 2 is 8, and here will be the square root of 28. Okay, see, 28 can be expressed in its simplest form. So this will be 8 times into bracket the square root of 4 times 7. Okay, 4 times 7 will give us 28, and this will be 8 times the square root of 4 times the square root of 7. And moving on, we should be having 8 times 2 times the root of 7. 8 times 2 will give us 16, so we will be having 16 root 7. This is the solution for this